Welcome to the Dev Banner. This is Eric. This week on this how-to series, we're going to look at loops for Go or Golang. As you know, if you've been a developer for a while, loops are very important. It's how we get stuff done. That's a repeating or often common task that we want to do over and over again with our data structure. Mostly has to do with either arrays or maps or dictionaries, that kind of data structure. And so I wrote a little program and I'd like to show it to you, maybe explain some loops. So just know that I wrote functions called demo something, and every time this parse input is just waiting for a standard in result, which is just hitting the enter key, and then I'm going to clear the screen, and then we'll go on to the next one. So with that, let's go ahead and look at demos simple loops. Well, let's start it first. So I'm going to go build and do loop tut. And to beginning off, I'm doing a simple forever loop, and you can see it's like going out of control. It's not going anywhere. So I'm doing Control C, and that is this right here. In Go, if you do a for and then have nothing in there, then it's just going to keep going. And so I'm just counting. Count start at 0, I'm just doing a plus plus and then printing that out. And so for you to get out of this infinite loop, you'd have to have some kind of breaking system, some kind of breaking logic. So if count equals 10, for instance, then I'm going to break. Now you're going to see that before I did this, that in Visual Studio, it actually says there's some unreachable code, meaning it kind of sees what's going on here and says, I can't get to this code. There's just no way because there's no break loop. So we're going to do that again, equals 10. And then we are going to break, which means once it hits this condition and comes in here and sees this keyword break, it's going to break out this level of for loop. And we'll talk about a little bit about what some options are there on that break, and most really nested for loops. And so the for loop in Go is exactly what it is. It's just a for loop, but there's various instances of it or different types of for loops. The Go developers basically said, hey, we just want to make the loop easy, so we're just going to change how the signature looks, but we're still going to use the for loop. So if you're familiar with other languages, you have like a do or a do while or a while do. Sometimes you have like a for each, but Go guys said, hey, we're just going to change the for loop. And so here's the infinite loop. Here's your traditional for loop where you start with a variable with, with a starting integer, because it's always going to be an integer in this case. And then some kind of condition where it says, this is where I'm going to break. So in this case, we're going to go to length of int array, which is 6, and as long as I is under 6, it's going to stay in this loop, and then when the loop is done, it's going to I plus plus, and that's our increment. Here's a range. They added a keyword, so this is like for each, but it's just for with a range, and it's going to range over this I or this int array, and it's going to put the index of where it's at in I. And then there's this range with element, and you can still do a range over this array. And here's the index, and then here is an actual copy of what's in that index. So let's go ahead and run that. And you'll see that I counted to 10. I did my little welcome to loop tutorial. So there's my traditional loop. All I'm doing is say, hey, my int array with my index, what's my number? Or what's the value? Range over, I'm doing the same thing. So both of these are equivalent. But this one with the array element, I'm just saying, hey, give me, I'm still doing a count, and then I'm just displaying the element, which is, you know, this integer. You can do this to strings or floats, booleans, you know, whatever that array is. And so let's go on. So this demo continue is, I'm just going to press enter. And the continue is, hey, if it meets this condition like the break earlier, then you're just going to continue on to the next. You're not going to break out of this loop. You're going to continue on with the next one. So you'll see that when it comes to 11, I'm just going to continue. I'm not going to print. So, you know, it's 2, 5, 7, continue, 21, 32. Seems pretty easy. And then press enter, and we're going to do a break. And this break is same thing as before. If you get to a certain condition, you want to break out of this loop. And in this case, you're going to see that I did a range, but I left off the index of that array. You do that with an underscore, and it just ignores it. So once again, in Go, if you assign a variable and don't use it, which I'm not using it in this instance, then you can't assign it. You can't create a variable and not use it. So Go says, hey, just put an underscore there and we'll just ignore it. But you have to have this signature. You can leave it, as you saw before, with just an I, which is just the first one, which is index, or you have to have both, and then you just ignore the first one if you just want to deal with a copy of what's inside. So here's a loop with a switch break, and this is one of the gotchas I'm going to get. Actually, gotchas are coming up next. So I'm going to press enter. This is what it's waiting for. And we're going to see that it breaks, and we print out 2, 5, but this is a gotcha. Now, it broke at 7, right? And you would think that, oh, I broke and I would get totally out of this for loop. No, the break gets out of the switch statement. So you have to be kind of careful if you have a switch within a for loop, and you try to break, that's not going to work. So you'll see that we still broke, and then we still into the for loop, and we did 7, 21, and 32. So that's kind of a gotcha. So the gotcha loop, go ahead and press enter. And this gotcha loop is let's look at it, is we got the same array, and then we're printing the values only. And then I'm looking and I'm saying, hey, if there's a number that's a mod divisible of 3 and there's no remainders, that's the mod, that's what this percent is, and most languages have that, or they have the word MOD. I think it's modulus. And you can divide the number by 3 and have no remainder. Then let's go ahead and assign A to 100. So that only number would be 21. None of those else have a remainder of 0 if you were to mod it. And you'll see that we didn't change it. This should be 100. And this is a gotcha. And that is, if you're taking a copy of a range, you can't alter it because it's not actually changing the value of that because it's a copy. So that's one of the gotchas, and you have to be careful. And so in order to do that, you need a range over with an I, and you can do both. Like, we're printing both. I module it, but then I'm going to change it with an index of this array. So let's go ahead and press enter, and you see 4, position 4 in the array, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, got changed. And with that, arrays start at 0 index in Go. So there's that. So let's look at maps. Maps are, or hash arrays, or dictionaries, whatever language you maybe be used to. These are pretty simple. You can just get the key, just like you would the index and the copy. But in this case, the first one's always the key, and this is the value of that map. And so we're just printing it, and then I print a line, and then you can change it kind of like how we're doing it here. And this kind of looks like an array, but this is actually the value of that map. And we changed it and reprinted it out, and that's the change. So you can change a map within because of the way the data structure is for maps. And then tag loops, or loop tags. So let's go ahead and look at that. This is a loop tag, and what I'm showing is I've got this outer loop and this inner loop, and I have 2 for loops right here that are nested. I have nested for loops, and I'm printing the outer loop, which is this one, and I'm printing this inner loop, and I get to this condition. And this is how you break with a outer loop. You just say, hey, I want to break, and it actually breaks the loop that's right after this loop tag. And that's what that would look like. And it's handy. But if you didn't want to break, you can continue also. So we'll press enter here, and you'll see that I've gone on and printed, but it always breaks or always continues after 7, but it continues on this one. So you'll see that 1, 2, 3, I go through all 9 of them, but I only get to 7 because that's what the inner loop tells me to do. So with that, there is how to use loops in Golang. See you next time. Please subscribe to the channel and make sure notifications are turned on.